I'm Emma Collins, 29, and I just walked away from the most lucrative sales position in commercial real estate after discovering my bosses were planning to steal everything I'd built. For 3 years, I cultivated relationships with Fortune 500 companies generating over $50 million in revenue while they paid me scraps. When I finally quit to start my own firm, they didn't just keep my client list, they sent cease-and-desist letters claiming I'd stolen their proprietary contacts. The clients I'd personally nurtured for years suddenly received calls saying I was unstable and untrustworthy. They thought they could destroy my reputation and keep my billion-dollar portfolio. What they didn't know was that I'd been documenting their illegal practices for months, and every single one of my clients was about to discover exactly how they'd been overcharged and manipulated. Before we jump back in, tell me where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Like this video if you've ever had your hard work stolen from you. Let me take you back to how this all started. 3 years ago, I was fresh out of business school with an MBA and a mountain of student debt. Commercial real estate wasn't my first choice. I dreamed of working in tech startups, but when Meridian Properties offered me a position with what seemed like unlimited earning potential, I couldn't say no. The interview process should have been my first red flag. Richard Blackwood, the managing partner, spent more time talking about their proprietary client relationships and trade secrets than actual real estate. His partner, Michael Torres, kept emphasizing how protective they were of their business assets. They made me sign a non-disclosure agreement before I even saw the office. When they finally offered me the position, the employment contract was 23 pages long. Most of it was standard stuff: salary, benefits, work expectations, but buried in the fine print were clauses that made my stomach turn. Any client I worked with would be considered a Meridian Properties client in perpetuity. If I ever left the company, I couldn't contact any client for 2 years, couldn't work for any competing firm within a 100-mile radius, and couldn't use any proprietary information I'd learned while employed. The salary was decent, $85,000, base plus commission, but the commission structure was designed to keep me hungry. I'd only get 15% of my generated revenue after the first $500,000. In an industry where top performers typically earned 40 to 50% commission, I was being systematically underpaid, but I needed the job. My student loans were crushing me, and I'd already been rejected by 6 other firms. I signed the contract telling myself I'd prove my worth and renegotiate later. The first year was brutal. Richard and Michael treated me like an expensive intern, having me organize their files, research property values, and handle their scheduling. When I finally got my first real client assignment, a mid-sized logistics company looking for warehouse space, I threw myself into it completely. I'd spent weeks researching every available property, analyzing traffic patterns, studying their business model to understand their specific needs. I negotiated a lease that saved them $200,000 over 5 years compared to their previous location. The client was thrilled, and the deal generated $150,000 in commission for Meridian. My cut, a $5,000 bonus, and a pat on the head from Richard. That's when I realized the game they were playing. The proprietary client relationships weren't some sophisticated business strategy. They were a way to trap talented agents and steal their work. Every relationship I built, every late night I spent understanding a client's business, every innovative solution I developed became their property the moment I walked through their door. But I'm not a quitter. I decided to play their game better than they did. If they wanted to own my client relationships, I'd make those relationships so strong that clients would follow me anywhere. I started treating every interaction as an investment in my future, building genuine connections that went beyond simple transactions. The irony was that my approach made me incredibly successful at Meridian. While Richard and Michael focused on quick deals and high-pressure sales tactics, I focused on understanding my clients' businesses inside and out. I became their trusted advisor, not just their real estate agent. Little did I know that this very success would eventually lead to my downfall and their destruction by my second year at Meridian. I had developed a system that would have made any business school professor proud. I kept detailed records of every client interaction, not just for compliance purposes, but because I genuinely cared about their success. My client relationship database became my most valuable asset, though I didn't realize at the time how valuable it would become as evidence. Take Marcus Rodriguez, the CEO of TH Corp. When he first came to Meridian looking for a new headquarters, Richard and Michael saw dollar signs. They quoted him a premium rate and tried to rush him into the first expensive property they showed him, but I saw something different, a visionary leader who needed a space that would grow with his rapidly expanding company. I spent 3 weeks studying TechCorp's business model, their growth projections, and their company culture. I toured their existing space, talked to their employees, and even attended one of their quarterly all-hands meetings to understand their needs. When I finally presented my recommendations, it wasn't just about square footage and lease rates. It was about creating a workspace that would support their innovative culture and accommodate their projected growth. The property I found them was unconventional, a converted warehouse in an up-and-coming district that most agents would have dismissed, but it had everything Tech Corp needed: open collaborative spaces, room for expansion, proximity to the tech talent they wanted to recruit, and parking for the electric vehicle charging stations they planned to install. The lease terms I negotiated saved them $2.3 million over 7 years compared to Richard's original proposal. Marcus was so impressed that he started referring other companies to me personally, not to Meridian, to me. He would tell potential clients ask for Emma Collins specifically. She's the only one there who actually understands business. This pattern repeated itself with client after client. Sarah Chen from Global Logistics needed a distribution center that could handle their omni-channel fulfillment strategy. I spent days researching supply chain optimization and toured facilities across 3 states to understand best practices. The facility I found them increased their fulfillment efficiency by 40%. David Park from Precision Manufacturing was looking for a facility that could accommodate their specialized equipment while meeting strict environmental regulations. I learned more about industrial air filtration systems and waste management protocols than I ever thought possible. The space I found them not only met their current needs but positioned them to expand into new product lines. Each success story came with the same frustrating pattern. I'd spend weeks or months building the relationship, understanding the client's unique needs, and crafting the perfect solution. Then Richard and Michael would swoop in for the contract signing, taking credit for my work and collecting the lion's share of the commission. My database grew to include not just contact information, but detailed notes about each client's business, challenges, growth plans, family situations, and personal interests. I knew that Marcus's daughter was starting college and he was concerned about tuition costs. I knew that Sarah was dealing with a difficult divorce and needed flexible meeting schedules. I knew that David was passionate about sustainable manufacturing and was always looking for ways to reduce his environmental footprint. These weren't just professional relationships, they were genuine friendships, built on mutual respect and trust. My clients knew I had their best interests at heart, not just Meridian's bottom line. By the end of my 3rd year, I had generated over $50 million in revenue for Meridian. My commission checks were getting larger, but they were still a fraction of what I should have been earning. More importantly, I was building something valuable, reputation for integrity and expertise that extended far beyond Meridian's walls. I started to realize that my real asset wasn't the commission I was earning, it was the trust I had built with some of the most successful business leaders in the region. That trust was something no employment contract could claim ownership of, no matter how many pages of fine print they buried it under. What I didn't know was that Richard and Michael had been watching my success with growing concern. They loved the revenue I was generating, but they were terrified of losing control over the relationships that were driving it. They were about to make a move that would destroy everything. In doing so, they would hand me the tools I needed to destroy them. The moment that changed everything happened on a Tuesday afternoon in March. I was working late, finalizing the details on what would become the biggest deal of my career. $15 million headquarters lease for a growing biotech company called Gentech Solutions. Their CEO, Dr. Amanda Foster, had been courted by every major commercial real estate firm in the city, but she chose to work with me because of my reputation for understanding complex business needs. I was in the conference room, reviewing lease terms and preparing for the next day's contract signing when I heard voices coming from Richard's office. The door was slightly ajar, and I could hear Richard and Michael discussing something in urgent, hushed tones. I should have left. I should have packed up my materials and gone home. Instead, something in their tone made me freeze. They sounded worried, almost panicked. "She's becoming a problem," Richard was saying. "The clients are starting to see her as their agent, not ours. Did you see the email from Marcus Rodriguez? He specifically requested that Emma handle all future expansions, not Meridian Practizima." My heart started racing. They were talking about me. "The Gentech deal is the last straw," Michael replied. $15 million in commission, and she's going to walk away with $300K. That's more than some partners make at other firms. We can't keep paying her that kind of money when she's building relationships we can't control. I fumbled for my phone, my hands shaking as I started the voice recording app. Something told me I needed to capture this conversation. "So what's the plan?" Richard asked. "We let her close the Gentech deal," Michael said, his voice cold and calculating. "She's too invested in it now, and Dr. Foster trusts her. But after that's done, we terminate her for performance issues and client boundary violations. Performance issues. Richard laughed bitterly. She's our top performer. Doesn't matter. We document a few complaints about her being too involved in client relationships, maybe suggest she's been sharing confidential information inappropriately. Create a paper trail that justifies the termination. My stomach dropped. They were planning to destroy my reputation. What about her clients? Richard asked. That's the beauty of it, Michael continued. The contracts clearly state that all client relationships belong to Meridian. We keep her book of business, tell the clients she was terminated for ethical violations, and transition them to other agents. Some might be upset initially, but they'll get over it. And if they ask questions, we tell them she was unstable. Maybe mention some concerns about her mental health, her ability to handle pressure. Plant enough doubt that they won't want to follow her wherever she goes. I felt like I was going to be sick. These men I had worked for, generated millions of dollars for, were planning to steal my life's work and destroy my reputation in the process. When do we do it? Richard asked. 2 weeks after Gentech closes. Give it enough time that it doesn't look connected to the big commission check, but not so long that she can start poaching clients for her next job. You think she's planning to leave? Smart agents always are. And Emma's smart, maybe too smart for her own good. The recording captured every word, every callous calculation about my professional destruction. As I sat in the conference room, my hands shaking as I held my phone, I realized that I was facing the fight of my professional life, but I also realized something else. They had just handed me the evidence I needed to fight back. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat at my kitchen table staring at my phone and replaying the recorded conversation over and over. The betrayal hurt, but the strategic part of my brain was already working. If Richard and Michael wanted to play dirty, I would be ready. The next morning, I called my college roommate Jessica, who had become a successful employment attorney. Over coffee, I played her the recording. Emma, this is gold, she said, her eyes widening. They're planning to commit defamation, potentially breach of fiduciary duty, and depending on how they handle your termination, wrongful dismissal. But we need more than one conversation. What do you mean? This recording proves intent, but we need to document a pattern of unethical behavior. If you're going to take them down, you need to build a comprehensive case. That afternoon, I started what I privately called Operation Paper Trail. I began systematically documenting every conversation, every email, every questionable decision I witnessed. I bought a small digital recorder and started keeping it in my jacket pocket during meetings. The first thing I discovered was how systematically they had been overcharging clients. While reviewing old files to understand their billing practices, I found invoices that made my blood boil. They were charging administrative fees that didn't exist, marking up vendor costs by 40 to 60%, and billing for services they never provided. The Gentech deal was a perfect example. Dr. Foster had been charged $25,000 for due diligence research that I had performed as part of my normal job duties. There was a $15,000 market analysis fee for work I had done using publicly available data. They had even charged her $5,000 for specialized consulting that consisted of a 2-hour meeting where I explained local zoning regulations. I started cross-referencing these practices across all my clients. The pattern was consistent and damning. Marcus Rodriguez's Tech Corp had been overcharged by an estimated $180,000 across multiple transactions. Sarah Chun's Global Logistics had paid $220,000 in inflated fees. David Park's Precision Manufacturing had been billed for environmental assessments that were never performed, but the financial manipulation was just the beginning. I discovered that Richard and Michael had been taking kickbacks from preferred vendors, marking up services and splitting the difference. They had arrangements with construction companies, moving services, and even office furniture suppliers that padded every client's final costs. The most damaging evidence came from their own emails. Richard had a habit of bragging about their creative billing strategies in messages to Michael. One email chain about the Tech Corp deal included the line, "Rodriguez will never know what hit him. By the time we're done, he'll have paid for our summer vacations." Another email about a struggling client read, "If Patterson Manufacturing can't afford our fees, they shouldn't be in business. Squeeze them harder on the moving costs." I created a methodical system for organizing the evidence. Every document was scanned and stored in multiple locations. Every recording was transcribed and cross-referenced with relevant contracts and invoices. I built a timeline that showed not just individual incidents, but a pattern of systematic fraud spanning years. The psychological toll was enormous. I had to act normal around Richard and Michael while secretly documenting their crimes. I attended meetings where they discussed bilking clients, smiled and nodded when they praised my work, and maintained professional relationships with men I now knew were planning to destroy me. But I also discovered something else during those weeks of investigation. My client's genuine affection and respect for me had nothing to do with Meridian Properties. When Marcus Rodriguez emailed me personally to thank me for suggesting cost-saving measures that I had implemented without billing him, I realized that the relationships I had built were based on trust, not contracts. When Dr. Foster sent a handwritten note expressing her gratitude for my dedication to finding her company the perfect space, I understood that my real value couldn't be claimed by an employment agreement. The evidence folder grew thicker every day. Financial records, email chains, recorded conversations, and documented lies. I was building a case that would not only protect me from their planned attack, but would expose years of systematic fraud. 3 weeks after I overheard that conversation, I had assembled a comprehensive dossier that would make any prosecutors mouthwater. Richard and Michael thought they were preparing to destroy me. They had no idea that I was preparing to destroy them first. The Gentech deal closed on a Friday morning in April. Dr. Foster signed the contracts with a smile, personally, thanking me for going above and beyond her expectations. The commission check, $285,000, was the largest single payment I had ever earned. Richard and Michael were practically giddy, already calculating their own cuts. I knew I had exactly 2 weeks before they would execute their plan to destroy me. That weekend, I finalized my resignation strategy. Jessica had helped me craft a letter that was legally bulletproof while setting up my future defense. Every word was chosen carefully to protect me, while creating a paper trail that would work in my favor. On Monday morning, I arrived at the office early and made one final sweep of my workspace. I had already removed all personal items over the previous weeks, taking them home a few at a time to avoid suspicion. I used my phone to photograph my desk, my computer screen, and every area of my workspace, creating a visual record that I had taken nothing that belonged to Meridian. At 9:47 a.m., I knocked on Richard's office door. He and Michael were reviewing new property listings, probably planning how to distribute my clients after my termination. "Gentlemen," I said, my voice steady despite my racing heart, "I need to speak with you both." I placed the resignation letter on Richard's desk and watched their expressions change from confusion to shock. "Dear Mr. Blackwood and Mr. Torres," Richard read aloud, his voice growing tighter with each word. "Please accept this letter as my formal resignation from my position at Meridian Properties, effective immediately. After careful consideration, I have decided to pursue new opportunities that better align with my professional values and career objectives." Michael grabbed the letter, scanning it quickly. "Emma, what is this? Where is this coming from?" "I'm starting my own firm," I said simply. "I've learned everything I can learn here, and it's time for me to build something of my own." "Your employment contract prohibits you from," Richard started, "from contacting any clients for 2 years, working for competitors within a 100-mile radius, or using proprietary information," I finished. "I'm well aware of the restrictions. My new firm will operate in full compliance with those terms." The beauty of my resignation letter was what it didn't say. I made no accusations, revealed no knowledge of their planned betrayal, and gave them no legal ammunition to use against me. I was resigning to pursue new opportunities completely legitimate and impossible to challenge. "We'll need to conduct an exit interview," Michael said, his voice strained. "Review your client files, ensure all proprietary information remains." "Of course," I said. "I've already prepared a comprehensive handover document detailing the status of all my active deals. Everything is documented and ready for transition." I had spent the weekend creating a meticulous handover file that included every detail they would need to continue serving my clients, at least the details I was legally required to provide. What it didn't include were the personal relationships, the unspoken understandings, and the trust I had built over 3 years. "Your commission on the Gentech deal," Richard began, "is fully earned and due according to our employment agreement," I said. "The deal closed successfully, and I fulfilled all my obligations as specified in my contract." They couldn't argue with that. The commission was legally mine, and any attempt to withhold it would give me additional grounds for legal action. "Emma," Michael said, trying to sound paternal, "I think you're making a mistake. Starting your own firm is incredibly difficult. Most new agencies fail within the first year. Why don't you take some time to think about this?" "I appreciate your concern," I replied, "but my decision is final." The security camera in the lobby captured me leaving the building at 10:23 a.m. with nothing but my purse and a small box containing a few personal items I had forgotten. I had documented proof that I had taken nothing that belonged to Meridian Properties. 2 hours later, I was signing a lease for a small office space in the business district, just outside the 100-mile radius restriction. Collins Commercial Real Estate was about to become reality that evening. My phone buzzed with a text from Richard. We're disappointed in your decision, Emma. We hope you understand the legal obligations you're under. We'll be watching. I smiled as I forwarded the text to Jessica. They thought they were intimidating me. They had no idea that I was 10 steps ahead of them. The legal assault began. Exactly 8 days after my resignation, I was in my new office setting up furniture and installing phone lines when the certified mail arrived. 3 thick envelopes, each bearing the letterhead of Morrison, Klein & Associates, one of the most aggressive corporate law firms in the city. The first letter was addressed to me personally. The language was designed to intimidate CEASE and desist demand in bold red letters across the top. It accused me of stealing proprietary client information, violating my non-compete agreement, and engaging in tortious interference with business relationships. Ms. Collins has willfully and intentionally violated the terms of her employment agreement by misappropriating confidential client data and attempting to solicit Meridian Properties clients for her own financial benefit. The letter read, "These actions constitute theft of trade secrets, breach of contract, and unfair business competition." The second letter was even more vicious. It threatened criminal charges for alleged theft of proprietary information. Despite the fact that I had taken nothing from their offices, they claimed I had memorized and stolen client, contact information, and confidential business strategies. The third letter was the most telling. It was a template they intended to send to all of my former clients, warning them about my alleged misconduct and advising them to cease all contact with me. The draft letter painted me as unstable, unethical, and potentially dangerous to their business interests. It has come to our attention that Ms. Emma Collins, a former employee who was terminated for performance and ethical violations, may attempt to contact you regarding real estate services. The template read, "We strongly advise against engaging with Ms. Collins as she has demonstrated a pattern of unprofessional behavior and may not have your best interests at heart." I called Jessica immediately. "This is exactly what we expected," she said after reviewing the letters. "They're trying to scare you into compliance and poison your client relationships before you can establish your own firm. The good news is that these letters are legally baseless and potentially defamatory." "What do you mean? Look at the language they're using. They claim you were terminated for performance and ethical violations, but you resigned voluntarily. They're stating as fact that you stole information, but they have no evidence of theft. These letters could actually work in our favor if they follow through on sending them to clients." The psychological impact was immediate and devastating. Even knowing the letters were baseless, seeing my professional reputation attacked in such formal, legal language made me question everything. These were serious accusations from serious lawyers representing an established firm. What if clients believed them? I spent the next day crafting my response with Jessica's help. Our letter was calm, factual, and designed to create a legal record of their harassment. "Dear Mr. Morrison, your client's allegations are categorically false and potentially defamatory. Ms. Collins resigned voluntarily and in good standing. She took no proprietary information and has made no attempt to violate her employment agreement. Your client's threats appear designed to interfere with Ms. Collins' legitimate right to pursue her livelihood." But the real blow came when I discovered they had already started their smear campaign. A colleague from another firm called to warn me that Richard had been making rounds at industry events, telling anyone who would listen that I had been terminated for cause and was struggling with personal issues that affected my professional judgment. "Emma," my colleague said, "I don't believe a word of it, but they're working hard to damage your reputation. You need to be prepared for clients to hear some pretty ugly rumors about you." That night, I sat in my empty office and wondered if I had made a terrible mistake. I had given up a secure, well-paying job to fight a battle against people who seemed willing to destroy me completely. The cease-and-desist letters sat on my desk like a stack of accusations, each one a reminder of how badly this could end. But then I remembered the recorded conversation, the evidence of systematic fraud, and the trust my clients had placed in me. Richard and Michael weren't just trying to destroy my career, they were protecting their ability to continue cheating the very clients I cared about. I picked up the phone and called Marcus Rodriguez. If they wanted a war, I would give them one, but I wouldn't fight it alone. The phone calls started the very next day. I learned later that Richard and Michael had systematically contacted every client in my database, armed with a script designed to destroy my credibility while positioning themselves as the reasonable parties, protecting client interests. The first call I intercepted was to Dr. Amanda Foster at Gentech Solutions. I only found out about it because her assistant, Maria, had worked with me closely during the headquarters search and felt something was wrong. "Ms. Collins," Maria said when she called me, "I think you should know that someone from Meridian called Dr. Foster yesterday. They said some very concerning things about you." My heart sank. "What kind of things?" They claimed you had been terminated for sharing confidential client information with competitors. They said you had been under investigation for ethical violations and that Dr. Foster should be concerned about any proprietary information. You might have learned about Gentek's expansion plans. I felt sick. These weren't just professional attacks, they were character assassinations designed to make my clients question their own judgment in trusting me. Did Dr. Foster believe them? I asked. She seemed confused and upset. She asked me to research the claims and get back to her. That's why I'm calling you. None of this sounds like the Emma Collins we worked with. Within hours, I learned that similar calls had been made to TechCorp Logistics, Precision Manufacturing, and every other major client I had served. The script was consistent. I had been terminated for cause. I was potentially unstable, and continued contact with me could put their businesses at risk. But Richard and Michael had made a critical error. They weren't just spreading rumors, they were putting their lies in writing. Sarah Chen from Global Logistics forwarded me an email she had received from Michael Torres. The subject line read, "Important information regarding former employee Emma Collins." "Dear Ms. Chen," the email read, "we felt obligated to inform you that Emma Collins is no longer employed by Meridian Properties due to serious performance and ethical concerns. During her tenure with our firm, we documented numerous instances of unprofessional behavior, including inappropriate sharing of confidential client information and concerning patterns of emotional instability. We strongly advise against engaging her services as she may not have your company's best interests at heart. We would be happy to discuss transitioning your account to one of our senior partners, who can provide the professional service you deserve." I stared at the email in disbelief. They weren't just spreading rumors. They were creating a documented trail of defamation. David Park from Precision Manufacturing called me directly after receiving a similar email. "Emma, what the hell is going on? These people are saying you were fired for stealing client information. That doesn't sound like the person who spent 3 months learning about environmental regulations just to help us find the right facility." "David, everything they're telling you is a lie," I said, my voice shaking with anger. "I resigned voluntarily, and I never took anything that didn't belong to me. They're trying to destroy my reputation because they know my clients trust me more than they trust Meridian." "I figured as much," David said. "But Emma, they're calling everyone. Word is getting around the industry that you're some kind of corporate spy or unstable employee. You need to fight back." The most painful call came from Dr. Foster herself. Her voice was careful, professional, but I could hear the doubt that hadn't been there before. "Emma, I received some very disturbing information from your former employer. They're claiming that you may have shared confidential information about our expansion plans with other clients. I need to ask you directly, is there any truth to these allegations?" The fact that she even had to ask broke my heart. This was a woman who had trusted me with her company's most sensitive information, who had praised my integrity and professionalism. Now she was questioning whether I had betrayed that trust. "Dr. Foster, I give you my word that I have never shared any confidential information about Gentek with anyone. Everything I learned about your company was held in strict confidence, and it remains that way. I understand why you have to ask, but I hope you know me well enough to know that I would never violate that trust." There was a long pause. "I want to believe you, Emma, but these are serious allegations from a reputable firm. I need some time to sort through this." After we hung up, I sat in my office and cried. These weren't just business relationships, they were professional friendships built on years of mutual respect and trust. Watching that trust crumble under a barrage of lies was devastating. But as I wiped away the tears, my anger crystallized into determination. Richard and Michael had just made the biggest mistake of their careers. By putting their defamatory statements in writing and targeting specific clients with provable lies, they had given me everything I needed to destroy them. I picked up the phone and called Jessica. "It's time to go nuclear," I said. "They just handed us a defamation case on a silver platter." The war was about to begin in earnest. The call that changed everything came on a Thursday morning, 2 weeks into Richard and Michael's smear campaign. I was reviewing legal strategies with Jessica when my phone rang. The caller ID showed Marcus Rodriguez from TechCorp. "Emma," Marcus said, his voice tight with controlled anger. "I need to see you. Can you come to my office this afternoon?" My stomach dropped. Marcus had been one of my strongest client relationships, and if I lost his trust, it would signal to the entire industry that Meridian's campaign was working. "Of course," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Is everything all right? We'll discuss it when you get here." The drive to TechCorp's headquarters felt like the longest 30 minutes of my life. I had helped Marcus find and design this space, had celebrated with his team when they moved in, had become genuinely invested in their success. If he believed Meridian's lies, I would lose more than a client, I would lose a friend. Marcus's assistant, Jennifer, gave me a sympathetic smile as she led me to his office. "He's been in a mood all morning," she whispered. "Got some kind of email that really set him off." Marcus was standing at his window when I entered, looking out at the warehouse district where his company was thriving in the space I had found. "For them?" He turned as I sat down, and I was surprised to see anger in his eyes, but it wasn't directed at me. "Emma, I'm going to ask you a direct question, and I need a direct answer," he said. "Did you steal confidential information from Meridian Properties?" "No," I said without hesitation. "I took nothing that didn't belong to me, and I've shared no confidential information with anyone." "Did you resign, or were you fired?" "I resigned. Voluntarily? I have my resignation letter and can provide documentation of the entire process." Marcus nodded slowly, then reached into his desk drawer and pulled out a printed email. "This is what I received yesterday from Michael Torres." He handed me the email, and I read it with growing horror. It was even worse than the others I had seen. This one specifically accused me of sharing TechCorp's confidential expansion plans with their competitors, claiming that Meridian had evidence of my corporate espionage activities. "Marcus, this is completely false," I said, my voice shaking. "I would never, I know," he said firmly. "That's why I'm so pissed off." I looked up at him in surprise. "Emma, you spent 3 weeks learning our business inside and out before you showed us a single property. You attended our all-hands meeting, toured our existing space, and talked to our employees about what they needed. You found us a space that was perfect for our culture and our growth plans, and you negotiated terms. That saved us over $2 million. He walked around his desk and sat down across from me. "More importantly, you've had access to our most sensitive information for over 2 years. Our expansion plans, our financial projections, our strategic partnerships. If you were going to sell that information, you've had plenty of opportunities. The idea that you're some kind of corporate spy is so ridiculous it's insulting to both of us." Relief flooded through me, followed immediately by gratitude. "Thank you for believing in me. I don't just believe in you, Emma. I'm furious on your behalf. These people are trying to destroy your reputation with lies, and I won't stand for it. What can I do to help?" That's when I made a decision that would change the entire trajectory of the battle. "Marcus, what I'm about to show you might shock you," I said, pulling out my phone, "but I think you deserve to know the truth about what Meridian Properties has been doing to their clients." I played him selected portions of my recorded evidence, starting with Richard and Michael's conversation about their plans to destroy me. Then, moving to documentation of their systematic overcharging practices, Marcus's expression grew darker with each revelation. When I showed him the analysis of how much his company had been overcharged across multiple transactions, his hands clenched into fists. "Those bastards," he said quietly. "They charged us $50,000 for specialized market analysis that you performed as part of your normal job duties." "Among other things," I said. "I have documentation showing that this pattern extends to every client they serve." Marcus was quiet for a long moment, staring at the evidence, then he looked up at me with determination in his eyes. "Emma, I want to help you expose these people. What they're doing isn't just wrong, it's fraud. And what they're doing to you is defamation. I'll testify on your behalf, and I'll make sure other clients know the truth." For the first time in weeks, I felt hope. I wasn't fighting this battle alone anymore. "Thank you, Marcus, but I need you to understand that this could get ugly. They're not going to go down without a fight." He smiled grimly. "Good, I've been looking for a fight worth having." Marcus Rodriguez was a man of action. Within 24 hours of our meeting, he had assembled a team of forensic accountants to review every transaction TechCorp had conducted with Meridian Properties over the past 3 years. What they found was even worse than my initial analysis had suggested. "Emma, you need to see this," Marcus said when he called me the next morning. "Can you come back to the office? I want to show you what my accountants discovered." I arrived at TechCorp to find Marcus's conference room transformed into a war room. Spreadsheets covered the walls and 3 accountants were hunched over laptops, cross-referencing invoices with industry standards and comparable transactions. "Show her what you found," Marcus said to his lead accountant, a sharp-eyed woman named Patricia Chen. "Ms. Collins, what we've uncovered is systematic fraud spanning multiple years," Patricia said, gesturing to a massive spreadsheet projected on the wall. "Meridian Properties has been overcharging TechCorp through a variety of sophisticated schemes." She walked me through the evidence methodically. The $50,000 specialized market analysis fee was actually for basic research that any competent agent would perform without additional charges. The $35,000 environmental impact assessment was a standard review that typically cost $3,000 from qualified vendors. Me too, phone calls to complete. In total, We estimate that TechCorp has been overcharged approximately $340,000 across all transactions with Meridian, Patricia concluded. This doesn't include potential damages from inflated vendor costs and undisclosed kickback arrangements. Marcus's jaw was tight with controlled rage. $340,000. Emma, that's money stolen directly from my company's expansion budget. From employee bonuses, from research and development. These people aren't just unethical, they're thieves. But the most damaging discovery came when Patricia cross-referenced Meridian's vendor billing with market rates. She had identified a pattern of markup schemes that suggested Richard and Michael were receiving kickbacks from preferred contractors, security companies, and even cleaning services. Look at this, Patricia said, pointing to a series of invoices. Meridian consistently uses the same moving company for client relocations, and they're charging 60 to 80% above market rates. Either they're completely incompetent at vendor selection, or they're getting a cut of the inflated costs. I pulled out my evidence folder and showed Patricia the email chains I had discovered between Richard and the moving company owner. Her eyes widened as she read Richard's casual references to our usual arrangement, and the customary consideration for referrals. This is smoking gun evidence of kickback fraud, Patricia said. They're not just overcharging for services, they're actively colluding with vendors to inflate costs and split the profits. Marcus stood up and began pacing. How many other clients are being victimized by this scheme? Based on the patterns I documented, I said, every major client Meridian serves is being systematically overcharged. We're talking about millions of dollars in fraud across their entire client base. That afternoon, Marcus made a decision that would accelerate everything. He started calling other CEOs who had worked with Meridian not to gossip or spread rumors, but to share Patricia's forensic analysis and suggest they conduct their own financial reviews. The first call was to Dr. Amanda Foster at Gentech Solutions. Marcus and Amanda knew each other through industry networking events, and she trusted his business judgment. Amanda, I need to share something with you that might be difficult to hear, Marcus said, putting the call on speaker so I could listen. Have you ever had your Meridian Properties transactions independently reviewed for overcharges? Overcharges? What do you mean? They're billing practices. He shared specific examples without revealing confidential information, focusing on the types of inflated fees and fabricated charges they had discovered. My God, Dr. Foster said after hearing the evidence, they charged us $40,000 for specialized due diligence research. I assumed that was standard for a transaction of our size. It's not, Marcus said. Standard due diligence is typically included in the agent's commission or billed at cost if external services are required. What you're describing sounds like the same fraud pattern we identified. There was a long pause. Then Dr. Foster said, Marcus, can you recommend a forensic accountant? I think Gentech needs to conduct our own review. The second call was to Sarah Chen at Global Logistics. The third was to David Park at Precision Manufacturing. Within hours, word was spreading through the business community that major companies were discovering systematic fraud in their Meridian Properties transactions. By the end of the week, 5 companies had initiated independent financial reviews of their Meridian transactions. The preliminary results were consistent and damning. Every client had been overcharged by tens of thousands of dollars through inflated fees, fabricated services, and vendor kickback schemes. But the most important development came when Dr. Foster called me directly. Emma, she said, her voice carrying a mix of anger and regret. I owe you an apology. After reviewing our transactions with Meridian, it's clear that everything they told us about you was a lie designed to cover up their own criminal behavior. No, I do need to apologize. I should have given you the benefit of the doubt instead of believing their accusations without investigation. She paused, and when she continued, her voice was firm with resolve. Emma, I want to help you expose these people. Whatever evidence you need from Gentech, you have it. And I think it's time we started talking about legal action. The web of deceit was unraveling faster than Richard and Michael could contain it. Their attempt to destroy me had backfired spectacularly. Independent financial reviews quickly evolved into something more powerful, a coalition of defrauded clients, sharing information and coordinating their response to Meridian's systematic fraud. The catalyst was Marcus Rodriguez's suggestion to create a secure group chat where affected companies could share their findings without compromising sensitive business information. Within 48 hours, the chat included representatives from TechCorp, Gentech Solutions, Global Logistics, Precision Manufacturing, and 3 other companies that had discovered similar overcharging patterns. The numbers are staggering, wrote Patricia Chen, TechCorp's forensic accountant, who had volunteered to coordinate the financial analysis across all companies. We're looking at over $2.3 million in confirmed overcharges across 7 companies. And we're just getting started. Dr. Foster's message came next. Gentek's preliminary review shows $190,000 in fraudulent charges over 2 years. Our legal team is recommending immediate action to recover damages and prevent further victimization of other businesses. But the most explosive revelation came from Sarah Chen at Global. Her company had retained a different forensic accounting firm, and their investigation had uncovered evidence that went beyond simple overcharging. Everyone needs to see this, Sarah wrote, followed by a photograph of a contract between Meridian Properties and a moving company called Elite Corporate Relocations. We found this contract in documents that were accidentally included with our transaction files. Look at Section 12. The contract section clearly outlined a kickback arrangement where Elite Corporate Relocations would pay Meridian Properties 25% of all charges above $10,000 for referral considerations and relationship management. It was a smoking gun that proved deliberate collusion to defraud clients, David. Park's response was immediate. Elite Corporate handled our facility move last year. They charged us $85,000 for a job that 3 other companies quoted at $45,000. Meridian insisted they were the preferred vendor and pushed us to use them despite the higher cost. The group chat exploded with similar stories. Company after company reported being steered toward the same overpriced vendors, or pressured to use Meridian's preferred partners despite significantly higher costs. Marcus coordinated a video conference call for all affected companies, creating what he called the Meridian Victims Coalition. Watching 7 successful CEOs and business leaders share their stories of systematic fraud was both heartbreaking and empowering. What we're dealing with isn't just unethical business practices, said Janet Morrison, CEO of Coastal Manufacturing. This is organized criminal enterprise designed to systematically steal from legitimate businesses. The coalition members began sharing more than just financial evidence, documenting a clear pattern of character assassination designed to prevent clients from seeking honest representation. Dr. Foster shared the email Michael Torres had sent to Gentek. They specifically claimed Emma was emotionally unstable and had been terminated for sharing confidential information with competitors. Every single allegation has proven to be a deliberate lie. Same here, added David Park. They told us Emma was under investigation for corporate espionage. Now we know the only criminals in this situation were Richard and Michael themselves. These were successful business leaders who prided themselves on making smart decisions and protecting their company's interests. Discovering they had been systematically deceived and stolen from was both humiliating and infuriating, but their anger was focusing into strategic action. Marcus suggested they coordinate their legal responses to maximize impact and ensure that Richard and Michael couldn't play victims against each other. If we file individual lawsuits, they can try to settle quietly and make this go away, Marcus explained. We can build a case that exposes the full scope of their criminal enterprise. The coalition agreed to share all evidence through a secure document portal managed by Patricia Chen. They would coordinate their legal strategies while maintaining separate representation to avoid conflicts of interest. Most importantly, they would support each other publicly, making it impossible for Meridian to isolate and intimidate individual victims. Emma, Dr. Foster said during the call, we owe you a debt of gratitude. Without your courage in documenting their criminal behavior and your willingness to share that evidence, they would have continued stealing from businesses indefinitely. Saved not just your own career, but potentially dozens of other businesses from becoming their next victims. As I listened to these successful leaders express their gratitude and determination to seek justice, I realized that Richard and Michael's attempt to destroy me had created something they never anticipated, a coalition of their own victims, armed with evidence of systematic fraud and united in their determination to hold them accountable. The hunter had become the hunted, and their prey was no longer isolated and vulnerable. We were organized, we were angry, and we were ready to fight back. The first lawsuit hit like a thunderbolt on a Tuesday morning in May. Marcus Rodriguez and TechCorp filed a comprehensive civil action against Meridian Properties, Richard Blackwood, and Michael Torres personally, seeking $500,000 in actual damages and $2 million in punitive damages for fraud, breach of fiduciary duty, and racketeering. The legal filing was masterful in its scope and detail. Patricia Chen's forensic accounting analysis provided the financial foundation, while my recorded conversations and documented evidence exposed the deliberate nature of their criminal scheme. Most damaging of all, the lawsuit included the defamatory emails and communications that Richard and Michael had sent to clients, proving their attempt to destroy my reputation with malicious lies. I was sitting in my office when Jessica called with the news. Emma, it's filed, she said, excitement clear in her voice. The complaint was devastating. In its specificity, it detailed every fraudulent charge, every inflated fee, every vendor kickback arrangement. It included transcripts of my recorded conversations, copies of the defamatory emails, and financial analysis proving systematic theft spanning multiple years. But TechCorp's lawsuit was just the beginning. Within hours, the legal avalanche began. Solutions filed their complaint Wednesday morning, seeking $350,000 in damages and requesting a temporary restraining order to prevent Meridian from contacting other potential victims. Dr. Foster's legal team had included additional evidence of attempted witness intimidation based on threatening phone calls her staff had received after she began cooperating with the coalition. Global Logistics filed Thursday, with Sarah Chun's lawsuit including the smoking gun contract between Meridian and Elite Corporate Relocations. Her complaint introduced RICO charges, alleging that Meridian operated as a criminal enterprise engaged in mail fraud, wire fraud, and money laundering. By Friday afternoon, 5 separate lawsuits had been filed, with 3 more companies preparing their complaints for the following week. The local business journal ran a front-page story. Major commercial real estate firm faces multiple fraud allegations. The media attention was immediate and devastating for Meridian's reputation. The story included quotes from coalition members, describing the systematic fraud and my role in exposing it. Emma Collins demonstrated extraordinary courage in documenting and exposing criminal behavior that was victimizing businesses throughout our region. Marcus Rodriguez told the reporter, without her evidence and her willingness to speak truth to power, these crimes would have continued indefinitely. Richard and Michael's response was panicked and poorly coordinated. They hired Morrison, Klein, and Associates, the same firm that had sent me the threatening cease-and-desist letters, to represent them in the civil cases. Their strategy seemed to be denial, deflection, and continued attacks on my credibility. Their first press statement was a masterpiece of former employee who was terminated for cause. Emma Collins has demonstrated a pattern of vindictive behavior and professional misconduct that calls into question any evidence she may have provided. Jessica was practically giddy when she read me their statement over the phone. Emma, they just committed defamation in a public press release. She laughed. They're doubling down on claims that have already been proven false. This statement alone is worth another $100,000 in damages. The business community's reaction was swift and unified. Industry associations began investigating Meridian's practices. The Better Business Bureau opened a formal complaint review. The state licensing board initiated an ethics investigation that could result in the suspension of Richard and Michael's real estate licenses. But the most satisfying moment came when I received a phone call from Jennifer, Marcus's assistant at TechCorp. Emma, I thought you should know what just happened, she said, barely able to contain her excitement. Richard Blackwood called here about an hour ago, demanding to speak with Marcus. When Marcus took the call, Richard was screaming about ungrateful clients and frivolous lawsuits. What did Marcus say? He told Richard that TechCorp looked forward to presenting their evidence in court, and that if Richard had any further communications, they should go through TechCorp's attorneys. Then Richard said something about how this was all your fault and Marcus just lost it. Jennifer paused and I could hear her smiling. Marcus told him that Emma Collins was the most honest and professional agent he'd ever worked with, and that, if Richard had any more defamatory comments, Marcus would personally ensure they were included in the lawsuit. Then he hung up. That evening, I sat in my office looking at the news coverage of the lawsuits. Distanced themselves after hearing Meridian's lies, were now calling to offer support and referrals. The transformation was remarkable. Just weeks earlier, I had been a pariah facing professional destruction. To destroy me by attacking my integrity and professional reputation, instead, they had proven my integrity beyond any doubt and established my reputation as someone who would fight for what's right, regardless of personal cost. The reckoning they had tried to avoid was now inevitable, and their victims were no longer silent or isolated. Justice was coming, and it was bringing friends. The irony was delicious. Richard and Michael, who had spent weeks trying to destroy my reputation and prevent me from working, suddenly found themselves facing the exact situation they had tried to create for me. Their clients were abandoning them, their reputation was in ruins, and their professional survival was in jeopardy. The first sign of their desperation came in the form of a settlement offer that arrived by overnight courier on Monday morning. Morrison, Klein, and Associates had prepared identical letters for each of the companies suing Meridian, offering to settle all claims for 30% of the demanded damages and a confidential non-disclosure agreement. Marcus called me immediately after receiving his offer. Emma, they're trying to buy their way out of this, he said, reading from the settlement letter. They're offering TechCorp $150,000 to settle our $500,000 claim. Plus they want us to sign an NDA that would prevent us from discussing the case publicly or cooperating with other plaintiffs? What did your attorneys recommend? They told me to reject it immediately. This isn't just about money, it's about preventing them from victimizing other businesses. If we settle quietly, they'll just find new ways to steal from their next clients. The coalition's response was unanimous. Every company rejected the settlement offers. More importantly, they made their rejections public, with several CEOs giving interviews about why they refused to let Richard and Michael escape accountability. Through financial settlements, this isn't about the money we lost, Dr. Foster told the Business Journal. It's about ensuring that these criminals can't continue operating in our community. The publicity generated by the rejected settlements had an unexpected consequence. More victims came forward. Companies that had worked with Meridian over the years began conducting their own financial reviews and discovering similar patterns of fraud within 2 weeks. The coalition had grown to include 12 companies representing over $4 million in potential damages. The state attorney general's office announced they were opening a criminal investigation into potential racketeering charges, but the most devastating blow to their own employees. Jessica called me on a Thursday afternoon with news that changed everything. Emma, we just received a call from someone who used to work at Meridian. Evidence of systematic fraud. The whistleblower was Linda Martinez, Meridian's former bookkeeper. What they hadn't anticipated was that Linda had kept copies of financial records that documented the full scope of their criminal enterprise. I always knew something was wrong, Linda told us during our first meeting. Richard and Michael were constantly pressuring me to create invoices for services that were never performed or to inflate vendor costs beyond what we actually paid. Linda's evidence was a prosecutor's dream. She had copies of internal emails discussing fraud strategies, documented instructions to overbill clients, and financial records showing the kickback payments from vendors. Most damaging of all, she had recordings of conversations where Richard and Michael discussed their plans to milk clients for everything we can get away with. They specifically talked about targeting successful companies that were too busy to scrutinize bills carefully, Linda explained. Richard called it the success tax. Successful companies could afford to pay inflated fees, so they deserved to be overcharged. With Linda's evidence, the coalition's legal position became unassailable. The criminal investigation accelerated, resulting in significant prison time for both Richard and Michael. The psychological pressure on them became evident when Michael Torres appeared at my office unannounced on a Friday afternoon. He looked haggard, his usually immaculate appearance disheveled and desperate. Emma, we need to talk, he said, pushing past my assistant before she could stop him. Michael, you shouldn't be here, I said, reaching for my phone. Any communication needs to go through attorneys. Please, just listen to me for 2 minutes, he pleaded. This has gotten completely out of hand. Richard and I made some mistakes, but we never intended for things to go this far. I activated the recording app on my phone and gestured for him. To continue, we're prepared to make this right, he said. Full restitution to all clients plus damages. We'll sell the business if necessary. Just convince your clients to drop the criminal investigation. Michael, I don't control my former clients' decisions, I said. They're pursuing justice because you and Richard stole from them and then tried to destroy my reputation to cover it up. We can make the reputation thing right too, he said desperately. We'll recommend you to our remaining clients. Just please, help us stop this before it destroys our lives. I looked at this man who had planned to destroy my career and reputation, who had called me unstable and untrustworthy, who had tried to steal the relationships I had built through years of honest work. Now he was begging me to save him from the consequences of his own actions. Michael, I said quietly, the people you victimized deserve justice, and I won't interfere with that process. He left without another word, but not before I had captured his admission of guilt and his desperate attempt to avoid accountability. The recording would become another piece of evidence in the growing case against Meridian Properties. The tables had turned completely. Faced with overwhelming evidence and the prospect of federal racketeering charges, suspended both of their real estate licenses pending the outcome of the criminal investigation. Linda Martinez's testimony to the grand jury, her evidence was so comprehensive and damning that prosecutors offered Richard and Michael a single opportunity to negotiate plea agreements. Before formal indictments were issued, their attorneys advised them to take the deal. The plea hearing was scheduled for a Tuesday morning in July. I sat in the courtroom gallery with Marcus Rodriguez, Dr. Foster, and several other coalition members as Richard Blackwood and Michael Torres stood before the judge to formally admit their guilt. Mr. Blackwood, the judge said, how do you plead to the charges of mail fraud, wire fraud, and operating a racketeering enterprise? Richard's voice was barely audible. Guilty, Your Honor. Mr. Torres, how do you plead to the same charges? Guilty, Your Honor. The judge accepted their pleas and scheduled sentencing for the following month. As part of their plea agreements, Richard and Michael had agreed to full restitution to all victims, forfeiture of business assets, and cooperation with ongoing investigations into their vendor kickback schemes, but the criminal plea was only the beginning of their accountability. The civil lawsuits proceeded to final judgment, with courts awarding not just full restitution but significant punitive damages designed to deter similar criminal behavior. TechCorp was awarded $750,000 in total damages. Gentech Solutions received $550,000. Global Logistics was awarded $680,000, with additional damages for the time and resources they spent uncovering the fraud. Across all 12 companies in the coalition, the total judgments exceeded $6.2 million. The financial penalties were devastating for Richard and Michael personally. They were forced to liquidate Meridian properties, sell their personal assets, and file for bankruptcy. Their homes, cars, and investments were seized to satisfy the court judgments, but perhaps the most satisfying moment came during the sentencing hearing. Each victim company was allowed to present impact statements describing how the fraud had affected their businesses and their trust in professional relationships. Marcus Rodriguez spoke for TechCorp. Richard Blackwood and Michael Torres didn't just steal money from my company, they violated the trust that makes business relationships possible. Their criminal behavior forced us to question every professional relationship and audit every transaction to ensure we weren't being victimized. Again, Dr. Foster's statement was equally powerful. Emma Collins demonstrated the courage and integrity that Richard Blackwood and Michael Torres completely lack. They created a system designed to exploit the trust that successful businesses place in their professional advisors. They stole not just money, but confidence in the integrity of business relationships. Their attempt to destroy my reputation, when I threatened their criminal enterprise, shows the lengths they were willing to go to protect their illegal profits. The judge sentenced Richard to 18 months in federal prison and 3 years of supervised probation. Michael received 15 months and the same probation terms. Both were ordered to perform 500 hours of community service and were permanently barred from working in real estate or financial services. As we left the courthouse, Marcus put his hand on my shoulder. "Emma, I want you to know that watching you fight this battle has been inspiring," he said. "You could have taken their settlement offers and walked away quietly. Instead, you chose to protect other businesses and ensure that justice was served." "I couldn't have done it without all of you," I replied. "Your willingness to speak truth and seek justice made all the difference." Dr. Foster joined us on the courthouse steps. "Emma, there's something we've all been discussing and we want to run it by you." The Emma Collins Award for Professional Courage would recognize individuals who demonstrate integrity in challenging circumstances. I was speechless. These successful leaders who had been victimized by fraud wanted to honor my role in exposing it and seeking justice. As we stood on those courthouse steps, watching Richard and Michael being led away to begin their prison sentences, I realized that their attempt to destroy me had accomplished something they never intended. Regardless of personal cost, justice had been served. But more importantly, integrity had triumphed over greed. While Richard and Michael were beginning their prison sentences, I was building something that represented everything they weren't. A commercial real estate firm based on transparency, integrity, and genuine client advocacy. And the response was overwhelming. My first client was, appropriately, Marcus Rodriguez. TechCorp needed additional warehouse space for their expanding operations, and Marcus insisted that I handle the transaction personally. "Emma, after everything we've been through, I can't imagine trusting anyone else with our real estate needs," he said when he signed the representation agreement. "You've proven that you'll put client interests ahead of everything else, including your own safety and comfort." The warehouse search that followed became a template for how I wanted Collins Commercial Real Estate to operate. Instead of rushing Marcus toward the highest commission property, I spent weeks understanding TechCorp's operational needs, growth projections, and budget constraints. I brought in industrial efficiency experts to analyze workflow patterns and logistics specialists to optimize distribution strategies. The property I ultimately found was not the most expensive option. In fact, it was significantly less costly than the alternatives, but it was perfect for TechCorp's needs. The lease terms I negotiated saved them $400,000 over 5 years compared to their previous facility costs. "This is how real estate services should work," Marcus said after we completed the transaction. "You're not just finding us space, you're helping us optimize our business operations." Word of TechCorp's positive experience spread quickly through the business community. Dr. Foster at Gentech Solutions became my second client, followed by Sarah Chen at Global Logistics. Each transaction reinforced my commitment to transparent pricing and ethical business practices. My fee structure was revolutionary. In its simplicity, instead of hidden markups and fabricated charges, I offered flat fees for specific services and transparent commissions with no additional costs. Every vendor recommendation came with full disclosure of any relationships or considerations. Every transaction included detailed documentation of all charges and the justification for each expense. The contrast with Meridian's practices couldn't have been starker. Where Richard and Michael had hidden their true costs and profit margins, I provided detailed breakdowns showing exactly how much I earned from each transaction. Where they had steered clients toward expensive preferred vendors, I required competitive bidding for all services and passed cost savings directly to clients. The business grew rapidly through referrals from satisfied clients. Dr. Foster recommended me 2-3 biotech companies looking for specialized laboratory space. Marcus referred to technology startups that needed flexible office arrangements. Sarah Chen connected me with logistics companies seeking distribution facilities. But the most meaningful referral came from an unexpected source. Linda Martinez, the former Meridian bookkeeper whose testimony had been crucial in the criminal case. Linda had started her own business as a forensic accounting consultant, helping businesses identify potential fraud in their vendor relationships. She recommended Collins Commercial Real Estate to her clients as an example of transparent, ethical business practices. Emma, what you've built here is what every professional service should look like, Linda said during one of our quarterly business reviews. Your clients know exactly what they're paying for, why they're paying it, and how your interests align with theirs. The success metrics were gratifying. Collins Commercial Real Estate's client satisfaction scores were the highest. In the regional market, my transaction volume grew by 300% in the first year, despite deliberately avoiding the high-pressure sales tactics that characterize the industry. Most importantly, my average client relationship lasted significantly longer than industry standards. With over 90% of clients returning for additional transactions, the financial success followed naturally from the ethical approach. By earning genuine trust and delivering exceptional value, I was able to command premium fees for my services, while actually saving clients money compared to the fraudulent practices they had experienced elsewhere. Industry recognition came in the form of the Regional Commercial Real Estate Association's Ethics in Business Award, presented annually to professionals who demonstrate exceptional integrity in their practices. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. I was being honored for the same commitment to truth and transparency that Richard and Michael had tried to destroy. But the real measure of success wasn't awards or revenue, was the relationships I had built with clients who knew they could trust me completely. When Marcus Rodriguez called to discuss TechCorp's next expansion, his first words were, "Emma, we need to find more space, and there's no one else we'd even consider working with." Collins Commercial Real Estate had become what I had always envisioned, a firm where client success was the primary measure of professional success, where transparency replaced manipulation, and where integrity was the foundation of every business relationship. Richard and Michael had tried to destroy me for threatening their criminal enterprise. Instead, they had forced me to build something better than they ever could have imagined. 1 year after the criminal convictions, I was sitting in my corner office at Collins Commercial Real Estate, reviewing our first annual financial statements. The numbers were remarkable not just for their size, but for what they represented. A complete vindication of the principle that ethical business practices and financial success were not just compatible, but mutually reinforcing. Collins Commercial Real Estate had generated $2.8 million in revenue during our first full year of operation. My personal income had exceeded $400,000, more than double what I had ever earned at Meridian Properties. Despite charging lower fees and providing more transparent service, the difference was volume. Satisfied clients were referring new business at an unprecedented rate. Patricia Chen, who had left her corporate accounting position to become my business manager, knocked on my office door with a knowing smile. "Emma, you need to see the latest industry report," she said, handing me a trade publication. Meridian Properties officially closed last month. Richard and Michael couldn't maintain operations after losing their licenses and clients. I read the brief article about Meridian's dissolution. Their client base had completely evaporated following the criminal convictions. The few remaining agents had either joined other firms or left the industry entirely. The office building that had once housed their operations was now leased to a law firm specializing in business ethics. "There's something poetic about that," Patricia observed. "The space where they plan to destroy your career is now occupied by attorneys who help businesses maintain ethical practices." The contrast between our trajectories couldn't have been starker. While Richard and Michael were serving prison sentences and facing bankruptcy, I was expanding Collins Commercial Real estate and being recognized as a leader in ethical business practices, the recognition had extended far beyond our local market. I had been invited to speak at the National Commercial Real Estate Ethics Summit, where my presentation on building trust through transparency had received a standing ovation from over 500 industry professionals. The Harvard Business School had reached out about developing a case study based on my experience, focusing on how ethical practices could drive business success while protecting client interests. The case study would be used in their MBA program to teach future business leaders about the practical benefits of integrity-based business models. But the most satisfying recognition came from clients who had become genuine friends and business partners. Marcus Rodriguez had invited me to join TechCorp's board of advisors, providing strategic guidance on their real estate strategy as they expanded into new markets. Dr. Foster had recommended me to serve on the Regional Business Development Council, where I helped evaluate economic development proposals. The phone on my desk rang, interrupting my reflection. It was Sarah Chen from Global Logistics. "Emma, I have some news that I think you'll find interesting," Sarah said, her voice carrying barely contained excitement. "I just received a call from a reporter at the Wall Street Journal. They're doing a feature story about business leaders who have transformed their industries through ethical practices, and your name came up as a primary example." "What kind of story?" I asked. "They want to interview you about how exposing corporate fraud led to building a more successful business, based on transparency and client advocacy." The reporter said your story has become legendary in business ethics circles as an example of how doing the right thing can lead to better outcomes than cutting corners. After we hung up, I walked to my office window and looked out at the bustling business district where Collins Commercial Real Estate was now recognized as the most trusted firm in the market. My client base included some of the region's most successful companies, all of whom had chosen to work with me specifically because of my reputation for integrity. The irony was perfect. Richard and Michael had tried to destroy my reputation by claiming I was untrustworthy and unstable. Their lies had backfired so completely that I was now known throughout the industry as someone who would sacrifice personal comfort to protect client interests and expose fraud. My phone buzzed with a text message from Marcus. "Emma, saw the article about Meridian closing. Justice served. Celebrating at TechCorp tonight if you want to join us." As I prepared to leave for the celebration, I reflected on the journey from that terrifying moment when I overheard Richard and Michael planning my destruction to this moment of complete professional vindication. The battle had been difficult and frightening, but it had also been transformative. I had learned that integrity wasn't just a moral choice. It was a business strategy that created sustainable competitive advantages. Clients were willing to pay premium fees for services they could trust completely. They referred business to professionals who demonstrated genuine commitment to their success. They remained loyal to advisors who put client interests ahead of personal profit. Richard and Michael had operated on the assumption that business success required deceiving and exploiting clients. They believed that transparency would limit their profit margins and that honest practices would put them at a competitive disadvantage. They had been completely wrong. Collins Commercial Real Estate's success had proven that ethical practices didn't limit business potential, they unleashed it. When clients trusted completely, they engaged more deeply. When they felt protected rather than exploited, they became advocates rather than simply customers. As I locked my office that evening, I realized that the best revenge against people who had tried to destroy my integrity was building a business. That proved integrity was not just the right choice. It was the smart choice. Richard and Michael had lost everything by choosing greed over honesty. I had gained everything by choosing truth over profit. The sweet taste of success was made even sweeter by knowing it had been earned through principles that would never compromise or betray the trust that made it possible. The handwritten cards started arriving during my second year in business, but their impact never diminished. Each one represented a relationship that had been tested by adversity and emerged stronger than ever. Dr. Amanda Foster's card was the first to arrive after Gentech Solutions completed their expansion into a second facility. "Dear Emma, thank you for helping us find the perfect research facility for our new biotechnology division. More importantly, thank you for showing us what integrity looks like in business. Your courage in exposing Meridian's fraud saved not just our company money, but restored our faith that honest professionals still exist. Gentech will never work with anyone else. With deepest gratitude, Amanda." TechCorp's acquisition of 2 smaller companies required consolidating multiple facilities. "Emma, 3 years ago, you found us a warehouse that seemed too good to be true. Today, as we signed the lease for our consolidated headquarters, I realized that the space wasn't the most valuable thing you provided. It was the trust that made everything else possible. Thank you for proving that business relationships can be built on mutual respect and shared success, Marcus." But the card that moved me most came from an unexpected source. David Park's teenage daughter, who was applying to business schools and had written about my story in her admissions essay. Ms. Collins, my dad told me about how you helped save his company from fraud and taught him that honest business people still exist. I wrote my college essay about how your example inspired me to study business ethics. Thank you for showing young people that success doesn't require compromising principles. I hope to build a career that honors the standards you've set. Respectfully, Sarah Park. These weren't just professional acknowledgments, they were evidence of how the battle against Meridian had transformed not just business relationships but personal ones. My clients had become friends, their families had become extended family, and their success had become inseparable from my own. The transformation was most evident during our quarterly client appreciation events. Instead of the typical corporate networking functions, these gatherings felt like family reunions. Clients brought their spouses, shared stories about their children, and genuinely celebrated each other's successes. At our most recent event, I watched Marcus Rodriguez congratulating Dr. Foster on Gentech's latest research breakthrough, while Sarah Chen discussed logistics solutions with David Park's manufacturing team. These successful leaders had formed a network of mutual support that went far beyond their individual relationships with Collins Commercial Real Estate. Emma, Dr. Foster said, as the evening wound down, I want you to know that the network of relationships that grew out of our shared experience with Meridian has become one of the most valuable aspects of our business. We're not just clients of Collins Commercial Real Estate, we are part of a community built on trust and mutual success. The community had even extended to industry reform. The coalition members had worked together to establish new standards for commercial real estate practices, including mandatory disclosure of vendor relationships, transparent fee structures, and independent oversight of large transactions. Marcus Rodriguez had spearheaded the creation of the Business Integrity Initiative, a regional program that helped companies identify and avoid fraudulent business practices. Dr. Foster served on the board of the Commercial Real Estate Ethics Council, which developed industry standards for transparent client relationships. Their commitment to preventing other businesses from experiencing what they had endured was deeply personal. They understood that their success in exposing Meridian's fraud carried a responsibility to protect future victims. We learned something important during this whole experience, Sarah Chen told me during a recent meeting. Business relationships aren't just transactions, they're investments in trust that paid dividends for years. What you taught us wasn't just about real estate, it was about how to build sustainable business partnerships based on mutual respect and shared success. The loyalty my clients demonstrated went beyond business relationships. When my mother was diagnosed with cancer, Dr. Foster personally called to offer Gentech's medical research connections. When I was considering expanding into new markets, who had learned to be skeptical of business promises and suspicious of vendor motivations, the fact that they had chosen to trust completely again was a testament to how powerful authentic relationships could be. As I read through the collection of thank you cards that evening, I realized they represented something more valuable than business success. They were evidence that integrity wasn't just a business strategy, it was a foundation for building lasting relationships that enriched every aspect of life. Richard and Michael had viewed clients as sources of profit to be maximized and exploited. I had learned to see them as partners in mutual success and genuine friends whose prosperity enhanced my own. The difference between those approaches had determined not just business outcomes but the quality of life that business success could create. 2 years after Richard and Michael were sentenced, I stood at the podium of the National Commercial Real Estate Convention to accept the Industry Leadership Award for Ethical Innovation. The crystal trophy in my hands was beautiful, but what it represented was even more meaningful. Recognition that the principles I'd fought to defend were now becoming the standard for how business should be conducted. The auditorium was filled with over 1,000 real estate professionals, industry leaders, and business ethics experts. As I looked out at the audience, I spotted familiar faces from the coalition that had helped expose Meridian's fraud. Marcus Rodriguez was in the front row, beaming with pride. Dr. Foster sat with Sarah Chen and David Park, all of them applauding enthusiastically. When I first discovered systematic fraud at my former employer, I began to face a choice that many professionals encounter but hope to avoid: remain silent and preserve my immediate comfort. To build, the audience was silent, hanging on every word. One chose truth, not because I was particularly brave, but because the alternative, allowing good businesses to be victimized by criminal fraud, was unacceptable. What I discovered during that battle was that integrity isn't just a moral choice. It's a practical business strategy that creates sustainable competitive advantages. I spoke about how the coalition of defrauded clients had become a network of mutual support that extended far beyond real estate transactions. I described how transparent business practices had led to deeper client relationships and higher profitability. I explained how the courage to expose wrongdoing had ultimately created opportunities that would never have existed otherwise. Collins. Commercial real estate has grown by 400% over 2 years, not despite our commitment to ethical practices, but because of it, I continued. Our clients trust us completely because we've proven that their success is more important to us than our short-term profits. That trust translates into loyalty, referrals, and collaborative relationships that benefit everyone involved. The standing ovation that followed lasted nearly 5 minutes. But the real validation came afterward, during the networking reception, when dozens of young professionals approached me with questions about building ethical businesses in competitive industries. Ms. Collins, how do you convince clients to pay fair prices when competitors are offering artificially low fees? Asked a young agent from Portland. You demonstrate value that goes beyond price, I replied. When clients trust that you're working in their best interests, they'll pay premium fees for services they can rely on completely. The agents offering artificially low fees are usually making up the difference through hidden markups or vendor kickbacks. What advice would you give to someone who discovers unethical practices at their current firm? Asked another agent. Document everything, consult with an employment attorney, and remember that exposing wrongdoing isn't betraying your employer. It's protecting the clients your employer is victimizing. You owe more loyalty to the truth than to people who are breaking the law. The conversation continued for hours, with young professionals eager to learn how ethical practices could create competitive advantages rather than limitations. Their enthusiasm reminded me of my own idealism when I first entered the industry, before I learned how pervasive fraud and manipulation had become in commercial real estate. 3 months later, I received a call that brought the story full circle. Linda Martinez, the former Meridian bookkeeper whose testimony had been crucial in the criminal case, was opening her own forensic accounting practice and wanted to lease office space in the same building as Collins Commercial Real Estate. Emma, I want to be surrounded by professionals who share my commitment to ethical business practices, Linda said. Working near you and your team would remind me every day why I chose to speak truth instead of remaining silent about Meridian's crimes. As I helped Linda find the perfect space for her practice, I reflected on how the building that now housed both our firms had become a center for business integrity in our region. The law firm specializing in business ethics occupied the space formerly used by Meridian Properties. Collins Commercial Real Estate had grown to occupy an entire floor. Linda's forensic accounting practice would help other businesses identify and prevent fraud. The transformation was symbolic of broader changes in the industry. The Business Integrity Initiative that Marcus Rodriguez had founded was now operating in 12 cities, helping hundreds of businesses avoid fraudulent schemes. The Commercial Real Estate Ethics Council that Dr. Foster supported had established industry standards that were being adopted nationally. My phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. Emma, TechCorp just signed our biggest expansion deal ever. Guess who's handling the real estate? The only agent we trust completely. Congratulations on the award. You've earned every bit of recognition you're receiving. As I finished reviewing lease terms for Linda's new office, I realized that the new normal I had helped create was exactly what the industry needed. A business environment where success was measured not just by profit margins, but by the trust and integrity that made sustainable relationships possible. Richard and Michael had tried to destroy me for threatening their criminal enterprise. Instead, they had forced me to build something better, a business model that proved integrity and success were not just compatible, but inseparable. The battle that began with their betrayal had ended with the transformation of an entire industry's approach to client relationships. They had lost everything by choosing deception over honesty. I had gained everything by proving that truth was not just the right choice, it was the smart choice. As I looked out at the business district where Collins Commercial Real Estate had become synonymous with trust and transparency, I smiled at the perfect irony. The people who had tried to destroy my integrity had instead established my reputation as someone who would sacrifice everything to protect it. That reputation had become the foundation for a level of success that no amount of fraud or manipulation could ever achieve.